And we have Joe Strauss with us, who graduated from Columbia Institute of Chiropractic, which is now New York College. And Dr. Strauss was in private practice. How many years, Joe? Is it over 40 years?
46.
46, that's what I thought. 46 years in practice, is now retired. And what hasn't he done? I'd spend too much time talking about what he's all done, but the big contribution to the profession obviously resides in over 20 published books within our industry on chiropractic, plenty of lectures throughout the United States, but I've heard him share plenty of times that he never tried to compete with his friend and colleague Reggie Gold, so he stuck to the writings compared to the lectures. But besides all the contribution, he, I think, without further ado, has a family and wife that he spends his time with and resides in Leventon, Pennsylvania right now. So that's our friend Joe, who's here. And we also have no other than Dr. Nick Spano, who I believe, if I got this correct, graduated from the school that Joe Strauss taught at. Well, not only taught, but was a president at as well. I'll try to do the best of my history here. So after Nick graduated from ADIO, which is no longer within the profession, he went off and started his own private practice, but as he did so, contributed to the profession with extensive documentation on advanced muscle palpation, and has found his passion by teaching and doing seminars throughout the world on advanced muscle palpation. So if Joe Strauss was the president and teacher at a school that taught technique in order to be a chiropractor, I'm assuming he had over 46 years of extensive experience with it. And so I am going to open up today's conversation in that direction, but we'll take it as it goes, because I know how chiropractic can be a very broad conversation in general. So I will open it up with just a quick intro with Joe. Welcome here, Joe. Give us a little background on, you know, I guess technique and practice. Where looking back 46 years, what do you see? What do you know now? I guess if you could share your wisdom.
Yeah, I think it's what I've forgotten at this point in my life, which is probably more extensive than what I know now. And I'm still learning every day, and relearning some of the things that have slipped my mind over the years after being out of practice now for a number of years. I am not familiar with a lot of things, so I'm sure you guys can bring me up to date with some of the things that are taking place now. And I think that what I tried to do was to refine chiropractic to its simplest components and its simplest philosophy, and refine it so that the public could understand it, and chiropractors could understand it and have the opportunity to practice it. And of course, chiropractic is a philosophy, art, and science, as it was really first defined by the developer of chiropractic. And I think that we need to develop that philosophy, art, and science. And of course, we have to kind of refine some of the things that we consider part of that philosophy, art, and science, those things that are incorrect and those things that need to be reduced and and taken away, we've had to do, and I think we're still in the process of doing that. And that's what my life has been about, and teaching that in a chiropractic college. And so that's what I have been doing, and I guess I'm still doing it by virtue of the internet and some of the things I have. I really haven't written any more books, but I have over the years published about 26 books, but now I'm just kind of doing it by the internet, trying to advance with the technology that's being advanced in the academic circles, and so many people even learning their things by different types of media and different vehicles to educate people. And there still is the necessity for hands-on experience, and even though I'm not doing that practically anymore, we have people who are able to do it, and you two gentlemen are two important contributors to that.
Thank you. Yeah. Well,
Thank you.
Thank you. We're happy to have you on today's conversation, or involved in today's conversation. Let me open this up. Going back to ADIO days, Nick, can you give everyone a little background on, I guess, how technique was taught back when Joe was there and Reggie was there? Some of the great chiropractors that really started straight chiropractic movement back in those days. Can you give everyone a little bit of a background?
Sure, I would love to. I'm not the historian that Joe is, but and of course he has much broader exposure and experience than I do. But first of all, it's a privilege to be on with you two guys, and I'm going to say, especially with Joe, who's such a mentor and, as I've said before, like a father figure to me. He was at the helm of ADIO when I got there. Reggie was just leaving, to everyone's disappointment. But then we found out in short order that Joe was not only going to keep the same philosophy, the same curriculum, but had the same passion for chiropractic, and really was a steady force behind the school, just very faithful, even in all the tumult, all the political and legal tumult that we're going through. Joe kept a steady hand on the helm, and really so grateful for the fact that he navigated us through those rough waters and got us to the other side. I graduated in '82, and the college was still called ADIO, Institute of Straight Chiropractic, and it was we were in a fight for our life, and then essentially we had to. Oh, and my cat is here. Isn't that something? And we had to return to the school 2 years later to for a week's instruction to be considered graduates of what was then called Pennsylvania College of Straight Chiropractic. And you're going to see Jackson jump up on my lap. So the long and short of it is all the pieces were in place when Reggie left the school. Joe kept things as they were, and not only did that, but really brought on other great administrators. Sean Kavanaugh is one that comes to mind immediately, and others. And the philosophy was amazing. I believe it was called Philosophy 801, our first introduction to philosophy with Joe Strauss in first quarter. I don't know, maybe it was called 101, but I seem to remember it was 801, where Joe introduced us to the concept of what was then called the ADIO analysis, a form of examining the spine, analyzing the spine, using a really static palpation, but the muscles that we're examining are anything but static. They are actively responding to the subluxation. And I have to say, this is, okay, you can get down now, Jackson. This is, that was like a revelation to me. I'd already been exposed to chiropractic philosophy through my family. And to find out that there was a method of analysis based on trust for the innate awareness of the body for its needs. Just made all the sense in the world. And Joe and Reggie had taken the work that had started down at Sherman College and threaded it through our whole curriculum. Dr. Harry Shepard was the head of the technique department, and a great technique instructor. He was a Palmer grad who, just really had a great sense of technique in his hands. John Kern was the assistant technique instructor. John just recently took my seminar. He's got a big crop of white hair, and here's the assistant head of the department that taught me taking my seminar. That was a blessing. Harry's son and widow, Pat Shepard and Toggle Shepard, that's his real name, both took a recent seminar, which was amazing. So I could go on about that, but the beauty of trusting the body for finding subluxations struck me right away, and I took a deep dive into it, and it's been just a wonderful ride ever since, instructing chiropractors all over the United States, Canada, South America, and a handful of times in Europe. And I'm continuing to try to open up the eyes of chiropractors to just the wonders of innate intelligence right there at the spine, where chiropractic philosophy, science, and art intersect.
That's great, Nick. I appreciate that background. Let's go back even before Nick was in school. Joe, what were you guys using as a resource, or were you just creating your own resources? But what resources did ADIO have in regards to technique, or did you guys just create it as you were working through the curriculum? Does something pop out where you guys were looking at what B.J. Palmer was writing before your time and saying, hey, this is right, but this isn't necessarily philosophically correct, so let's realign it and go down this avenue? Has anything come to mind?
Yeah, I think that almost every chiropractor at one time or another was using what we're talking about today, but didn't even know what he was doing. And in fact, one of my classmates, even up until a few years ago, was saying, "I just push on bumps."
Yes,
that's how he described what he did. And obviously, Nick has taken that a little bit, refined that a little bit more. That we don't just push on bumps, but what we're pushing on is the spine, and what the body is trying to do about the spine in order to correct the subluxation. I think the thing that we have really understood or begin to understand is that the body really dislikes, if I can use that term, dislikes a vertebral subluxation and is trying to get rid of it or try to reduce it. And what Nick's muscle palpation is doing is trying to find out how and in what way the body is trying to do it, what the mechanism that it's using. Of course, it uses muscles, and that's why the term muscle palpation came into being. And just exactly in what way it's trying to do it, and that's of course involves the science of chiropractic and knowing the science of the movement of and the action of muscles in order to correct a vertebral subluxation. So I think that you guys and are trying to refine chiropractic a little bit further, and I think that's something that has been necessary and needed all along. We were just the pioneers, and maybe we didn't understand it much better than pushing on bumps. But now you guys have defined what pushing on bumps is all about, and what exactly we are endeavored to do. Recognizing that it's really the body that makes the adjustment.
Absolutely.
That's right.
We really are,
Can I key in on that, Trent, and ask Joe a question?
Yeah.
Sure.
That has recently come to light with me, the idea that every chiropractor, every philosophically grounded chiropractor, recognizes it's the body that makes the adjustment. We don't put the bone where it belongs. We essentially don't know exactly where the precise position where the bone belongs, but we if I can say it this way, we unlock it. We push it towards what we have surmised is an ideal position using whatever analytical tools we've been taught and are at our disposal. But every technique and really every principled chiropractor will tell you, I don't correct the subluxation, the body corrects the subluxation. So it's really struck me recently that, as you said in Philosophy 801, the only active tissue the body has to do that, to accomplish that, are the muscles, are these small, deep muscles of the spine. So what my question is, why then, while chiropractors recognize that it's innate, it's the wisdom of the body that makes that correction, ultimately makes that adjustment, why do they not put any thought into the fact that we can then walk backwards and look at the muscles, palpate the muscles, even use technology to figure out what those muscles are doing prior to the adjustment so we can just cooperate? Like, so I'm asking you, Joe, it's a universal truth, essentially, in chiropractic philosophy, that the body makes the correction. Why don't more chiropractors recognize they can also take advantage of that information before the adjustment for the sake of analysis? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that too many chiropractors have read their press clippings and have convinced themselves that they're making the adjustment and that they know where that bone belongs. And that's one of the things that I think is great about the technique that you've been teaching, is that it's based upon the fact that we don't know exactly where that bone belongs to the millionth of an inch, if you will. We just know the direction that the body is trying to move it, and that's what the muscle palpation determines where the body doesn't want the vertebra. That's what's happening, because the body is trying to correct that subluxation, and so all we're doing is taking note of that and trying to move that bone in a direction that it does belong. And there's that much wisdom within the body that it will move that bone back into its proper position, even though we don't know. And that's why I think it was BJ used to say that you could throw all your patients down the cellar steps and half of them would get well. I'm not sure that that's the technique of choice, and it's definitely not the one that you guys recommend or that I recommend. But the fact is that the body does know where that bone belongs and it's trying to move it in that direction. All we're doing is analyzing the spine and saying, yeah, that's the direction it doesn't want it, and we don't know exactly where it wants it, but the muscles in the body and the wisdom of the body, as you say, and knows where that bone belongs and will endeavor to move it back and is trying to move it back. That's what
absolutely
we're feeling, is where the muscles of the body are trying to move that bone, and just giving a little push.
So I love that. So we're using an educated force along with, in cooperation with those muscles, and trusting that there's a physiologic or a homeostatic mechanism within those muscles that's corrective. And a lot of chiropractors have never actually heard that, or don't really fully understand what the implications of that are. It's based on now also based on our knowledge of the stretch reflex from mechanoreceptors like the muscle spindles and ligamentous receptors that are in place, very sophisticated, complex mechanisms that are constantly talking to the brain about proprioception, movement, and position. And so it's affirming or confirming our philosophical trust for the body that there are these very advanced, that's why we call it advanced muscle palpation now, even though I love the name, the ADIO analysis, which implies, even our technique comes from above down and inside out. And that was Reggie's genius. But the sophistication here is internal to the body. And as you implied before, when you said too many chiropractors have read their press clippings, there's so much focus on technique. There's so much focus, maybe now, especially with social media, we're all trying to grab the limelight, and it's putting, chiropractic philosophy to me has always been about our humble position. We're not healers. We're not attempting to be healers. We're not attempting to say that we know what the body needs. We're simply removing interference. And yet today, there's so much hoopla around which technique is the greatest and what's the best way to move the bone. And yet so many students, I've talked to hundreds, if not thousands of students through the years, through the decades now, they're excited about adjusting subluxations, but they'll tell you, no one's telling them how to find the subluxations. Very clumsy efforts with, oftentimes really relying on bony palpation or no palpation at all. And they're at the disadvantage of just using the flying 7. Again, hoping that something falls into place. That's pretty common. Other tools like X-rays and motion palpation leg checks are all useful, but I think one of the and here's Jackson. He just keeps trying to climb up on my lap, by the way. So I think one of the advantages of using advanced muscle palpation is that, yes, we're relying on educated, but we're trying to reduce that reliance as much as possible, so it's more of a trust, again, for the internal mechanisms that the body's using, and again, a humble position. I use a graphic in my presentations where there's this vast reservoir behind the library, much like the library you've got behind you, but this large library, and behind it is this reservoir, a reservoir that informs, that really is, the library captures all the knowledge, all the information that's in that big reservoir, and then and then there's a seat right beside the library, like you're sitting there now. And I've always used that graphic to suggest that the body uses all its resources for healing, and the knowledge behind these little muscles is vast, and we need to not only respect it, but we can trust it and rely on it once we learn how to use it properly. So it's obvious to everyone, Joe, I'll compliment you here, that you come from a very humble place. You're not shouting. You're not trying to get yourself attention. You've always been focused on chiropractic philosophy and trying to get students and chiropractors to recognize the beauty of our philosophy. And I think that's the chiropractic message, is that it's not about us. It's not about our technique. It's not about how necessarily skilled I am, even though skill is important. It's not necessarily about how much I know. It's about how much the body knows, and just correcting the subluxation and getting out of the way. Can you speak to that?
I think that's great and very, very apropos, because that is what we do. And I think that when we realize that we need to get out of the way as much as possible, as soon as possible,
Yeah.
that the chiropractic would be better off. And I think that's part of this refining process that's going on within the profession now, and what you fellows are involved in doing, refining what we do. But I think that refining process really needs to be based upon the fact that we don't know where that bone belongs. We don't know what the body is going to do about the correction of that subluxation, and realize that what the body is going to do about the correction of that subluxation is not our responsibility. That's the responsibility of the innate wisdom of the body. And if we can do what we do as well as we possibly can, and then get out of the way, or recognize that the body has certain limitations, and if we understand those limitations, or understand that any addressing of those limitations is not part of our responsibility. We have enough responsibility to understand where that bone doesn't belong, and what the body is trying to do to correct that subluxation. That's enough. That's enough for us. And I don't think that D.D. Palmer, when he delivered that first adjustment, had any idea what he was doing, and what he should be doing, and what chiropractic was all about. But he crudely gave that chiropractic adjustment. I think they used to call chiropractors nose breakers, in that because the way the person laid down on the table, they didn't have the sophisticated tables. And that's been a refinement of chiropractic, so that when you fellows lie a person down the table, their face is not smashed up against, and the nose is not smashed up against the cushions, and they don't end up with a bloody nose or a broken nose.
Thank God.
When you give the adjustment. And so that's been refining. That's a mechanical refinement of chiropractic, and all we're trying to do, and what your efforts are to do, is to understand the best way that we can refine the analysis of the subluxation in the body. And
can you gentlemen excuse me for 10 seconds? I will be right back. I apologize. And you can take it for the next 15 to 20 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, no problem, Nick. Joe, let me jump in here. Let me ask you this. What do you see for the future of technique within the profession? What do you see for the future of, I guess, adjust and subluxation in the profession? What does it look like to you?
Well, I think that it looks like, I guess it really depends upon where we want to go as a profession, and if we are going to focus our attention on the subluxation, the correction of that subluxation, and not adding anything else to it. As long as I have the 15 seconds while Nick's oh no, Nick's back. Okay. I think that we need to understand what our limitations are as chiropractors. I think one of the great philosophers, I think it was Harry Callahan, who then went by the term titled Dirty Harry. In this movie, he said a man's got to know his limitations. And I think that's what we chiropractors need to know, what our limitations are. We don't heal the body. The innate intelligence does the healing. The body does the creation of that living tissue, and we don't do that either. And the body's been healing it since man began, and we just remove an interference, and we step back and allow the body to do what it needs to do. And if it can't, then we also recognize that some other professional may be necessary to come in there and do what he can for that person. But our responsibility is to remove that interference, and to do that as well as we possibly can, and to the degree that we are capable of doing that, and then step back and either allow that individual to decide whether they need something else in addition to having that interference in the nerve system at the vertebral level corrected, or whether they can just allow the body to take over and do what it can. And I think that when chiropractors understand that limitation that we have, then we'll have less problems with other professions who may feel like we're encroaching upon their area of expertise. And I think that we can have, the public can have an understanding of that important service that we uniquely present to mankind. And I think that then chiropractic can reach a better understanding. And I think that what you two gentlemen are doing is going a long way toward allowing us to understand and communicate that objective to the public.
That's good, Joe. All right, let me throw this same question at you, Nick. What's the future of technique look like in regards to our profession? What does it look like in regards to advanced muscle palpation? Where are we going? Joe touched upon where we're going is based off of is determined by limitations. So he didn't paint a picture of this as where I see it, but he definitely painted a point, and limitations plays a big factor in it. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to that, Nick, where
I would love to
see the profession?
Yeah, it's an honor to jump off from the point that my teacher and mentor, Joe, is making. And yeah, I think ironically or paradoxically, chiropractic is better served by recognizing our limitations. And yet we're limited while the innate intelligence itself is not. So chiropractic in one sense is bigger than any of us can imagine. It's maybe bigger than DD and BJ imagine. Now with today's research coming out of New Zealand, Heidi Havoc, research on the brain that a lot of great seminars are focusing on. Dan Murphy, John Minardi, James Chestnut, Dan Sullivan, certainly Heidi Havoc, that's an actual researcher out of New Zealand. They're recognizing that chiropractic has an influence on the entire body because, of course, we've always said simply to our patients, the brain controls the body. But now we know the subluxation actually interferes with mechanoreceptors that then, and nociceptors, which then interfere with the brain. So on the afferent side of the complete cycle, the philosophical complete cycle, on the afferent side, the vertebral subluxation is having a greater impact on brain function than we ever really understood before. So chiropractic was always focused on the IVF, the motor nerves, and how a single nerve was affected from a subluxation. Now we know it actually has more global impact. So yes, our knowledge of what the body needs is very limited. I think we need to focus back on that and really celebrate that. That's not a bad thing. I was sharing with you the other night, Trent, when we were previewing this, we were discussing this conversation, that an analogy I like to use in my seminars where I'm trying to get students and chiropractors to recognize the wisdom of the body and at the same time recognize the limitations that Joe was talking about. We used to call that straight chiropractic, meaning we're just going to focus on correcting the subluxation, step back, watch what the body can do when there's no interference. One of the analogies I like to use now is to say, supposing you're not a chiropractor, but you're a neurosurgeon, and you walk into the room and the patient's sitting there who has a life-threatening brain tumor, and you've got the skills, the knowledge to remove that brain tumor, and you say, Mrs. Jones, you're in good hands. I've studied this in my entire life. This brain tumor is removable, and I know how to do it. I'm skilled. I'm experienced. And the patient says to you, yeah, but I've got a sore foot. Can you rub my foot at the same time? Now, That would be a crazy thing to ask. And yet chiropractors who are doing other things and treating other things, it's not that those things are not important to the patient. It's not that those things should not be treated necessarily. Maybe they should be treated. But we've got such a high and a noble calling to do something very simple, very precise, very limited. And yet when we do it, we're removing interference to the brain itself, to the function of the entire brain, which then cascades out to the whole body and has the benefit of improving overall health. And maybe the particular concern the patient came in with, maybe not. But if we believe what we say, that we don't treat symptoms, that we're non-therapeutic, at the same time, we recognize that this thing is really big. The resources behind the nervous system are virtually unlimited as far as controlling the body, controlling the healing process, controlling the immune system, and the subluxation has an impact on all that, including now we know it has an impact on our thought processes, on the prefrontal cortex. Certainly it has influence on everything that our brain does, which is everything.
That's good. So you're saying the future is what's hot right now in the profession, which is overall neurological function, brain function.
The future is actually a celebration of what we knew in the past, that chiropractic is very powerful because the intelligence is very powerful. So the research is highlighting that now and confirming that, and it's helping us to recognize the devastation that is caused by the vertebral subluxation, and that to do just that, only make a chiropractic adjustment is not only enough, it's a very big deal. And there's a grassroots resurgence within the profession to focus on the subluxation. And I'm seeing it in other countries. I'm seeing it even at the schools that are not necessarily known for chiropractic philosophy. They're some of the schools that really don't even like our terminology of subluxation and adjustment. They're very medicalized schools. Some of the students and the graduates coming out of those schools are some of the best chiropractors. And I think you're not far away from Northwestern, is that right?
Correct.
Yeah, Northwestern's got some great graduates like yourself, and great resources not that far from the campus of chiropractors like yourself that are mentors to students. And of course, you've got ChiroWay, which is, I don't know if you call that a franchise or a chain or how you describe that, but that's spreading subluxation correction in a very practical way with offices that are meeting the needs of a lot of people. And I don't know, you want to put a plug in there for ChiroWay?
Well, we don't have to go too far down that rabbit hole, but yeah, I think we built our practice, which is a franchise. We have 8 practices, all individually owned by chiropractors here in Minnesota, and we've done that just in the past 4 or 5 years, and that's pretty unheard of. So to go from 1 location to 8 locations in that amount of time, I have no doubt in my mind that success was built on a handful of factors, and one of them being a prime objective or a sole objective of correcting vertebral subluxation due to the negative influence subluxation has on the body's innate intelligence, overall well-being is what we tell our clients. We try to speak in several languages to be able to communicate with laymen or the general public. So what we're doing here in Minnesota relates specifically to technique. I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without the 2 of you and what you've done for our profession. And I am honored to be on this conversation and have this recorded, because to me this is one of my highlights that I can throw up on the wall of fame. So I appreciate both of you guys for what you've done for the profession, and I'm trying my best to give back to the profession as well. And that's why we're here. And that's, some of the questions that I'm trying to pull out of you guys is, where do we need to go? What's next? Is it more books? Is it more webinars? Is it more teamwork? Is it getting into the schools? The grassroots movement is without a doubt going. I see it as well. But what's next for our profession in order to keep the objective focused on correction of vertebral subluxation, but still get along? Because I remember one of Joe's books where he ended it in regards to saying, we've got multiple viewpoints in our profession, and sometimes the two most like-minded viewpoints can cause the most devastation within the profession, because they're fighting over the littlest things. And in my short time in this profession, I've learned that opposing viewpoints can actually bring more clarity at large. So what do we need to do for the students? I guess it's an open-ended question for both of you. Where do we got to take our mentorship, or where do we got to take our profession in order to keep this objective alive?
Joe, you have thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that what you guys are doing is it really is refining what we do to the basic thing, the science and the art and the philosophy of chiropractic. Making it practical is what has been demonstrated here this morning. That it can be taught to chiropractors, who can then in turn can present that idea to the public, and of course to chiropractors, who then can teach people how to utilize the techniques and the necessary technical skills to accomplish the objective of chiropractic. So both you gentlemen, I think, are putting into practice what I spent the last 46 years trying to refine as far as I could. Obviously, I can't do what you gentlemen are doing, and that's why you're here and I'm retired. But I think that just you two keeping up what you're doing and passing that on to others, and continuing to teach people that that's the objective and the goal and the intention and should be the desire of every chiropractor. That I think will be the area that we need to go. So I think that you two are, and I think that it's great that we have this going here today. I represent the last vestiges. In fact, I can recall in people used to say that I was a dinosaur, and I said, I went from the snot-nosed kid who didn't know anything to a dinosaur, and I never got to that respected member of the profession position. I seemed to jump right over that, and people said, my ideas were out of date, and no, I never thought that, but people have said that. I don't think my ideas are out of date. I think they need to be refined a lot more.
If I can interrupt you, Joe, I'm not just saying this to flatter you, but everywhere I've gone, and I'm sure I know you've done a lot of traveling yourself, but everywhere I've gone, virtually every place, someone, when they find out that you were the president of the school that I went to, and I mention your name, people have said to me all for the last 30 some years, I was on the wrong path in chiropractic, and having read one of the blue books just turned them around. Now, I've had people tell me it's changed my career, it's changed my whole life. And so your legacy is much greater than maybe you realize, or maybe just your humility is showing through again. But you and Reggie Gold, and I put you both in the same class, have the ripple effects of what you've done by laying out the philosophy that Reggie spoke and you wrote, will resonate. I believe will resonate into the future, and it's having an impact right now. So, I don't think either Trent or I are in your same league as far as helping students and chiropractors to just be chiropractors. And again, I use that term kind of ironically. When I say just be chiropractors, I think that's a great thing. I'm always, in the seminars, I'm always trying to walk that middle road where I'm telling students and chiropractors, we have to stop saying we save lives, because it puts the focus on us as if we're doing something to save someone's life. We're just getting the clouds out of the way of the sun. And while chiropractic has saved lives, it's only because the body is that smart. Like you said, to simplify it, it's the body is that smart. We are not that smart. And really, that's the glory of chiropractic, is that we're celebrating the truth that the innate intelligence, the central nervous system, is way beyond our ability to even comprehend. But then to manage it would be a fool's errand. And if somebody wants to be therapeutic and stimulate or inhibit the body or the brain, I have great respect for the therapists and for the medical profession and the physical therapy profession and all those professions that focus on treating what's wrong with the body. I think that simple message has been oftentimes lost, that's not our role. But your blue books and your instruction, your teaching, not only back to the days of Adio, the glory days of Adio, but to this day, focus on that it's the body. It's the innate. It's not the innate intelligence. It's not about us. You said earlier that, jokingly said earlier that, I think it was BJ that said, knock people in the back of the head with a shovel and knock them down the stairs, and some subluxations would probably be corrected. There's actually a movie. I don't know if you know, there's a movie that stars Jennifer Garner. And I believe the name of it, I'm pretty sure, is it's something, the term miracle is in the title, Miracles from Heaven, I believe. And it's a true documentary, it's a true life story, a story that tells this girl's story who is dying. And from a fall, her life was saved. And that was really a natural chiropractic adjustment. It's a wonderful movie. I'd recommend that chiropractors rent it and view it, because really it shows the power of an adjustment, even by accident, that actually saved this girl's life. And I mentioned earlier Toggle Shepherd, and there's a lot of chiropractors that don't know his story, that his real name is Toggle. And I could tell the story, but I'm sure you could probably tell it better because you knew Harry and Pat intimately. Do you want to share that story about how Toggle's life was actually saved?
No, I think that you could probably share just as well, being a student, because I'm sure Harry told it to all the students that he had in class. And I was sitting up in the president's office at that time. It's been an opportunity to hear those stories sold to the students, and he had a lot of wisdom which he shared with his students. And but I think getting back to this idea of limitations, we don't. Reggie used to say something. He used to talk about, you can only walk halfway into the woods. After you go halfway, you're going out. And you're walking out of the woods. And I think too many of our profession have gone that route and are walking into the woods and saying, wow, you know, this chiropractic is great. Maybe I can expand upon it. And they end up walking out of the woods. And that's why we have so many chiropractors doing so many things I'm calling it chiropractic, but it's really encroaching upon somebody else. You know, when you walk halfway into the woods and then you keep walking, you're walking out of the woods and walking into another profession. Mm-hmm. And I think that people need to understand that what you guys are trying to do with both of your approaches is to not walk out of the woods, but stay in the center of the woods and then climb up a tree and have a greater vision from that tree in the center of the woods, and you can have a greater vision, and that's what you're trying to do in the areas that we can, and the muscle palpation and the approach that Trent has is giving people more of a vision of what chiropractic can do within the limitations of what we have. And so there's nothing wrong with limitations. You know, I was having some vision problems recently, and I went to an ophthalmologist because I know that I went to my chiropractor first and got my spine adjustment. Then I went to the ophthalmologist because I thought he would know more about a vision problem that I was having. And he said, well, no, I don't want to look at that. You need to go to the hospital. And I said, but you know, you're an ophthalmologist, which means you're also a medical doctor. Can't you look at me? And he said, I wouldn't do that. I just look at your eyes, and there's nothing wrong with your eye, with a vision in your eye. So it's out of my area. You go to your family doctor and have him refer you to someplace else. And that's he would not even step out of his area, even though his area was so refined and so specific that he had a training in a lot of other areas. He would not go into one of those other areas. Instead, he referred me. He said, you know, go to the hospital and have them check you out and see what's wrong with you. And as it turned out, I had a medical problem that needed to be addressed by a medical doctor and diagnosed or analyzed by a medical doctor, and it doesn't mean I didn't still need chiropractic adjustments, but I needed to have that addressed by another professional, and it was not an ophthalmologist. It wasn't a chiropractor, even though I still needed chiropractic care, and I still need chiropractic care, but it was something that was outside the realm of chiropractic, at least the way I practice chiropractic. And I think that we have to know what our limitations are, and we have to be able to work within those limitations. And that's why I appreciate what you two guys are doing, working within the limitations of chiropractic.
And Joe, if I can ask Joe another question, you and Trent as well have built very large practices focused only on correcting subluxations without, you know, going out of your lane, without jumping into other disciplines or encroaching on other disciplines. You know, there's a lot of students that are fearful. You know, they're coming out with very large student loans and have to make a lot of money very quickly. They can't stumble around in the dark like I did when I got out of school trying to figure out how to do this thing and make a dollar. But you guys have built very large practices with a limited, as you're saying, a limited focus on the subluxation, correcting subluxation alone, not getting involved in treatment of symptoms, not getting involved with trying to pretend like we're on par with diagnosis and treatment. We're somehow on par with the medical profession. So my question is, it's rhetorical, but I'll ask you both to answer it. Is it possible to build a practice, a good practice, and make a good living by simply adjusting subluxations and not playing the, taking the role of the therapist?
Go for it, Joe.
I was just gonna turn that over to you, Trent, because I'm not building a practice any longer.
Well, you built a very large one, actually, an iconic practice.
Yeah, but I did that once I understood and what it was that I was doing, what my limitations were, and what the unlimited aspect of my limitations were, I guess. And it took me a while to do that, and I struggled because I went from not understanding what that was to then understanding what it was. And by then I had just by the sheer numbers of years in practice, I understood, and I had enough people that I could build a practice and then explain to people what I did and what I didn't do, and what my limitations were, and what the beauty and the unlimited ramifications were of what I did, and how those unlimited ramifications of what I did involve the nerve system, as you have mentioned, Nick, that there are unlimited ramifications of that, but those unlimited ramifications perhaps don't involve some of the things that other chiropractors might do, and things that I don't do. But this is what I do, and this is what I do as well as I humanly can. And I've had enough people said, yeah, I want that, but I understand that I may need something else. I think that we all have to understand that. In fact, I heard a guy who was selling, I think, he was advocating insurance, and he said, you know what, we're all going to die one day, so you need life insurance, and then if you understand that, you may need medical care at some point in your life. And even BJ, who understood that, and at some point in his life, he got under medical care, even though he was the greatest proponent of chiropractic. He still understood that he had limitations, and he went to a medical doctor at some point.
You're reminding me of is it just brought me back when ADIO, the college, had two different newspapers, if I remember correctly, Straight Ahead, and I think there was the first newspaper was the ADIO Analysis. It was actually called the ADIO Analysis, same title as the method of examination itself that was threaded through our curriculum. But I remember you guys allowed me to, and I was a student, publish a little philosophical article, and I titled it, because this was your message back then, limited to the unlimited. As chiropractors, we take a limited role, but the unlimited resources that we're working with are really what we should be, we should be recognizing and celebrating in our philosophy. And I'm just really afraid that there's a lot of rah-rah, chiropractic saves lives going on right now. And when you start focusing on what we do, You know who really does a good job of explaining this is, Matthew Alvord, and he's actually up in your neck of the woods, Trent. And Matthew basically, Dr. Alvord basically says, we're standing next to the table as innate intelligence is doing the work. Have such a limited role to play with this very specific adjustment that once our hands are done, the real work starts. The real the real glory is in what the body does with those forces. And recently, I've been trying to explain that a little bit better in the seminars by going back to the work of a scientist by the name of Panjabi, who made it very clear that there's no precise position that any vertebra occupies. It occupies what he called a neutral zone. So in any given posture, a vertebra might come to this position, and you come back from another posture, and a moment later, it's a millimeter away from that position. It's still where the body wants it within that posture. But the people that come closest to seeing malposition or misalignment are the upper cervical folks, and now they've got very new technology, CBCT and new technology. They make a valiant effort to see the misalignment. Blair technique does a great job, and then making a more specific adjustment. So I'm not advocating for sloppy adjusting because we don't know precisely where the vertebra belongs, but I'm saying all our analytical tools are important. We don't want to be sloppy adjusters, but at the same time, the wisdom of the body invested in those muscles, in those mechanoreceptors, knows more about where the brain and the innate intelligence wants that vertebra than we could ever imagine. If we would just, again, take that humble position and say, let me see if I can figure out what the body's trying to do with that vertebra using its own muscles that have built-in mechanoreceptors. They're flush throughout the spine. There's an abundance of these little muscle spindles throughout the spine, richer than anywhere else in the body, because they play a protective role and a corrective role, because the spine is just that important. God invested the muscles of the spine with more protective resources than anywhere else in the body because it houses the central nervous system, the spinal cord, spinal nerves. And so this method started out based strictly on philosophical foundation. And I think it confirms, again, our chiropractic philosophy was right all along, because science is coming back around and beginning to recognize that the body really is that smart. Subluxations really are that bad. Nerve interference really can influence the entire body. And a simple chiropractic adjustment, a specific but simple chiropractic adjustment, releases the imprisoned impulse. As I think it was that Stevenson's text that used that terminology, or was that BJ himself in the chiropractic specific? I just don't remember where that. Trent, do you remember where that?
It sounds like BJ. Sounds like BJ.
Okay.
And I'll add to what Joe was talking about in regards to having a limitation in practice and building a practice here as we wrap this conversation up. When you are more limited in practice or more focused, is what we say, we have a very focused practice that allows you to perfect your skill, perfect your technique, perfect your communications, your philosophy, so that you can better educate your clients and your community and your practice members on the importance of eliminating subluxation from the spine through a specific adjustment, just like we're talking here today. I feel if you try to do too much in practice, you limit yourself to perfection. So the limitation actually is by definition a restriction. A restriction is no different than resistance, and resistance in the weight world or in the exercise world builds strength. So the more limited you are, the more restricted you are, the stronger you're building your strength in practice to deliver the chiropractic adjustment, which therefore brings better results in practice. The better the results of providing chiropractic care and removing interference is the unlimited potential that you were talking about, Nick. It's beautiful. It's a circle. It's just like any philosophical discussion that we could have on any topic. It works. So I feel that this is the only way to practice, which is being limited or focused or having a restriction to what you're doing. So limitations are just like any opposing viewpoint. They actually build strength and build clarity because you're not, you're like BJ used to say, you're not driving down the middle of the line. You're staying to your side of the line and driving down the right side or left side if you're in Europe. So I again applaud both of you for what you've done for the profession so far. I feel like you're not done yet, Joe. So just keep kicking and keep these interviews going and keep connecting with young students or young chiropractors like myself. And Nick, I look forward to getting you back out here in Minnesota so that you can get in front of more students and share your wisdom within the profession locally here. And I guess I'll open this up. Is there any last minute words of wisdom that you two would like to share before we wrap up today's conversation?
I'll leave the last word to Joe, but I'll say something before the last word, and that's not only is it an honor to be interviewed, to be asked to be interviewed, but to be on the same interview as Joe Strauss, who to me is legendary, and just such an honor for really to come full circle. He again was not only one of our instructors, but in my mind as a student, Joe was a very big deal being the president of the school. And looking back, our school was very small, very embattled. We were bludgeoned by the rest of the profession, really until the school was out of existence. But the ripple effects of that school still cascade throughout the profession. We've got no less than Jeannie Ohm, that was one of our graduates, and she has not only brought such great attention to the benefits of chiropractic care for children, but she has re-energized chiropractors to focus on the subluxation. So she was one of our graduates. There's been many, Brian McCauley, Judy Campanelli, who now runs the Strauss Chiropractic Center, and others that have had such a large impact on keeping the focus on the subluxation. I count Joe amongst the greats in the lineage of Dee, BJ, Reggie, Sid Williams. Joe Strauss is right up there in my mind, but he's the quiet giant, and that's, to me, again, the practical outworking of chiropractic philosophy. Every camp in chiropractic always sees the big egos and the technique gurus and the practice management gurus, and we all recognize that there's flaws in putting yourself out there as as this great person. And Joe hasn't done that. He has been a very humble servant to our profession, and certainly I'm in practice because of him and because of his service to ADIO, which was at great cost to him personally. So I'll just wrap up my end of things by saying this is really, truly one of the highlights of my career to sit in on this interview and talk with Joe after all these years.
That's great. I'd join you in on that as well. Joe, do you have any words of wisdom that you'd like to share with all of us and for those who are watching this recording?
I think just to bring the focus back to the two of you, I use the analogy of getting to the center of chiropractic, and then climbing a tree and having more of a vision of what's out there. And I think that's okay as far as an analogy, but I think a better analogy would be with a microscope and getting a closer look at chiropractic. And I think that's what the two of you are doing with your unique in it. And it's interesting that you had this old dinosaur speaking to the two of you today, because I've given one perspective, and that's what I'll continue to do as long as the Lord sees fit to keep me on this planet. I will do what I can by whatever means I can, and it's obviously not traveling around a lot. My travel is limited to the Reading area at this point, but I'll keep doing that. But I'll use whatever means I can, namely what we're using today. That person from Minnesota and the person from Eastern Pennsylvania can be talking. The three of us can be talking. But I think that what you two guys are doing is looking at chiropractic under a microscope. Still with chiropractic, you just are giving us a refined, and that's what you do with a microscope. When you adjust the microscope, you adjust the vision, the lens, so that you can have a better look. And I think that's what the two of you are doing, and that's why I'm so excited to have the opportunity to be with you today and to share with you. We the three of us have a unique contribution that we are making to chiropractic. All three are important, and so mine will probably be more limited than yours, only because I'm probably not going to be around as long as the two do. But I think that the contribution that you guys are making by adjusting that lens, that we can look closer at chiropractic within chiropractic, I think that's a tremendous contribution, and I applaud you. And I'm not unhappy about the future or getting out of the way, so that you guys have more of an opportunity to make your contribution, and hopefully we can make it together for the profession, and impact upon other chiropractors, and impact upon the public and the future of chiropractic. So I'm really thankful for the opportunity to be with the two of you today, and to share this video screen with you. Thank you for that opportunity and that invitation.
Well, thank you, Joe. Your words of wisdom in all your books that you provided will be echoed for eternity, and even today, for the short time that we've had. I pulled a few words out of your wisdom that I wrote down, and I plan on building upon. So you still have it. Keep going. And again, I appreciate both of you for being on this call today. And we'll just keep refining our practice and our philosophy for the greater good of humanity. I appreciate you both.
Thank you so much, Trent. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, you're welcome.
God bless you guys.